They say the past can stay buried if you run far enough, but no one ever tells you what happens when the past suddenly stops its car right in front of you. The rain that night fell in thin, icy sheets across the quiet roadside, turning the pavement into a shimmering mirror of red brake lights and distant street lamps. Liam Carter stood at the edge of the road with trembling hands, his worn sneakers soaked through as cold water seeped into his socks, but he barely noticed the discomfort. All he could feel was the heat radiating from the small body pressed against his chest. Noah was burning with fever. The little boy's soft curls clung to his forehead, while his tiny arms wrapped weakly around Liam's neck, his breathing uneven and fragile in a way that made Liam's heart pound harder with every passing second. Liam glanced down the empty road again, desperation tightening his chest. The nearest hospital was 15 miles away, and the last bus had stopped running nearly an hour ago. He had already tried calling a taxi, but the storm had flooded half the county roads and no drivers were willing to come this far out. "Please, just hold on a little longer," Liam whispered softly, pressing his cheek against Noah's warm hair as he stepped closer to the roadside and raised his arm again, hoping another car might appear through the rain. 2 years. 2 long years of quiet survival, of working odd jobs under a different name, of building a small life far away from the city he once called home. He had believed that if he stayed hidden long enough, the past would finally stop chasing him. He had believed Gabriel Knight would forget. The sound of an approaching engine suddenly cut through the storm, headlights slicing through the darkness as a sleek black car appeared around the bend. Liam's breath caught as he stepped forward, waving his arm with urgency. The vehicle slowed. For a brief second Liam felt relief flood his chest. The car pulled to the shoulder and stopped beside him, the polished surface reflecting the falling rain like liquid glass. Liam hurried toward the passenger door, clutching Noah carefully as he leaned down to speak to the driver. "Please, my son is sick. I just need." The words died in Liam's throat the moment the driver's door opened. A tall figure stepped out from the car, the glow of the headlights outlining a familiar silhouette Liam had not seen in 3 years, but would have recognized anywhere. Gabriel Knight. Even after all this time, Gabriel's presence carried the same quiet authority, the same sharp elegance that had once drawn Liam in like gravity. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Rain tapped steadily against the asphalt as Gabriel's dark eyes scanned Liam's face with a mixture of disbelief and something colder beneath it. Liam felt the world tilt beneath his feet. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times in his worst nightmares, but never like this. Never with Noah trembling in his arms and the past standing only a few feet away. Gabriel's gaze slowly dropped to the child pressed against Liam's chest. The softness in his expression vanished instantly, replaced by a hard, unreadable calm that sent a chill deeper than the rain through Liam's spine. And in that silent moment Liam realized the one thing he had feared most had finally happened. The man he had once loved had just returned to his life, and Gabriel clearly believed the child Liam was holding belonged to someone else. 3 years earlier, New York City had felt like a world that never slept, a city glowing with glass towers and endless motion, and Liam Carter had once believed it was the place where his future would begin. Back then he lived in a small apartment on the Lower East Side, barely 600 square feet, but filled with sketches, fabrics, and the quiet dream that one day his work as a designer would matter. Everything changed the night he first met Gabriel Knight. It happened at a corporate charity event Liam had only attended because a client insisted he deliver a custom suit personally. The ballroom overlooked the Hudson River, and the skyline shimmered through floor-to-ceiling windows, while music drifted softly through the room. Liam had felt completely out of place among the polished businessmen and elegant guests until a voice behind him said his name with calm certainty. Gabriel Knight had a presence that made conversations pause without effort. He was tall, composed, and carried the kind of quiet authority that came from someone who built his own empire in a city full of ambition. At first, Gabriel seemed almost unexpectedly gentle. He asked about Liam's designs, remembered details from their first conversation, and appeared days later with coffee simply because Liam had once mentioned he worked late nights. The attention felt flattering, even comforting. For the first time, Liam felt seen in a city that usually swallowed people whole. Their relationship formed quickly after that. Gabriel invited Liam to dinners overlooking Manhattan, to quiet drives across the Brooklyn Bridge late at night, to weekends spent in apartments that looked out over Central Park. Liam told himself it was love. For a while it truly felt like it. Gabriel listened when Liam talked about his work, encouraged his creativity, and made him believe he was important in a world filled with powerful people. But over time something subtle began to change. Gabriel's care slowly turned into something heavier, something that felt less like affection and more like ownership. He insisted on knowing where Liam was every evening. He sent drivers to pick him up instead of letting him take the subway. If Liam stayed late at the studio, Gabriel would call repeatedly asking when he planned to return. At first, Liam convinced himself it was concern. Gabriel was powerful, influential, and protective by nature. That was what everyone said about him. But the city that once felt exciting began to feel smaller around Liam. His friends stopped visiting as often because Gabriel preferred privacy. His projects slowly shifted toward clients connected to Gabriel's company. Decisions that once felt like Liam's choices quietly began revolving around Gabriel's expectations. One evening, while standing near the windows of Gabriel's penthouse overlooking the lights of Midtown Manhattan, Liam suddenly realized something that made his chest tighten. The view was breathtaking, the apartment luxurious, the future Gabriel promised secure and powerful. And yet Liam felt like a guest in his own life. Standing there nearly 800 feet above the streets of New York, he began to understand that loving Gabriel Knight meant living entirely inside Gabriel's world, and deep down Liam was not certain there would ever be room for his own. The realization that something inside his life had shifted came quietly, almost unnoticed at first, but the moment that truly changed everything arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Liam had woken before sunrise in the small apartment Gabriel kept for him near Midtown, the pale gray light of early morning slipping through the tall windows as the city slowly began to stir below. At first nothing felt unusual. He moved through the familiar routine of making coffee, checking messages from the design studio, and preparing to leave for work. But as the morning continued, a strange wave of dizziness passed through him, followed by a sudden exhaustion that felt far heavier than a long night of work should have caused. Liam brushed it aside at first, assuming it was simply stress. The past few weeks had been overwhelming with deadlines and client meetings arranged through Gabriel's network. Yet the strange fatigue continued for days. Food that normally smelled wonderful suddenly made his stomach turn. His focus drifted during work, and even walking the short distance from his apartment to the studio left him strangely breathless. Eventually, one of his co-workers gently suggested that he visit a doctor. Liam agreed, mostly to quiet the concern, fully expecting to hear that he simply needed more rest. The clinic sat on a quiet street on the Upper West Side, a place Liam had passed countless times without ever imagining he would step inside. The waiting room was calm and softly lit, the kind of space designed to ease nervous patients. But Liam still felt an uneasy tension in his chest as he waited for the results of the routine tests. When the doctor finally returned, her expression carried a careful gentleness that made Liam's heart begin to beat faster. She explained the results slowly and clearly, making sure he understood every word. Liam listened in stunned silence as the reality settled in. He was pregnant. The word echoed in his mind long after the doctor finished speaking. Liam left the clinic in a daze, stepping onto the sidewalk as the noise of New York surrounded him once again. Yellow taxis rushed past, pedestrians hurried along the crosswalks, and somewhere a distant siren echoed through the streets. The world had not changed, yet everything inside Liam felt completely different. His first instinct was disbelief. His second was fear. Gabriel's family was known throughout New York not only for their wealth, but also for their strict expectations. They controlled companies, investments, and social circles that stretched far beyond the city. Liam knew that if they discovered he was carrying Gabriel's child, they would immediately step in to decide what happened next. The thought made his chest tighten. Liam loved Gabriel once. Perhaps a part of him still did, but he could not ignore the quiet truth that had been growing in his heart for months. Gabriel's world left little room for choices that did not belong to Gabriel himself. As Liam walked slowly towards Central Park that afternoon, he placed a hand against his stomach, barely able to process the fragile life that now depended on him. In that moment, the path ahead became painfully clear. If he stayed in New York, this child would grow up surrounded by power and expectations that Liam had never chosen. If he stayed, Gabriel would decide everything. And for the first time since their relationship began, Liam understood that protecting his future child might mean doing something he had never imagined possible. He might have to disappear completely from Gabriel Knight's world. The decision did not happen in a single moment of courage, but in many quiet moments of fear. For several days after leaving the clinic, Liam carried the secret alone, moving through New York as if the entire city might somehow discover the truth written across his face. Gabriel continued his life as usual, unaware that everything was about to change. Business meetings filled his schedule, investors called late into the evening, and drivers waited downstairs to take Liam wherever he needed to go. From the outside, their life still looked perfect. Yet inside Liam, the weight of the future grew heavier with every passing day. Each time Gabriel spoke about long-term plans or invited Liam to events with powerful families, Liam felt the same tightening in his chest. He began to realize that once the pregnancy became visible, there would be no escaping the decisions Gabriel and his family would make. One evening, while standing in the quiet kitchen of the penthouse, Liam overheard a conversation between Gabriel and one of his associates about family expectations and legacy. The words were not cruel, but they were clear. The Knight family believed in control, in reputation, in protecting their influence at all costs. Liam suddenly understood that the child growing inside him would not simply be a baby in their eyes. It would be an heir, a symbol, a piece of the empire Gabriel was building. That night Liam lay awake long after Gabriel fell asleep beside him, staring at the dim city lights glowing through the bedroom windows nearly 900 feet above Manhattan. The city that once felt exciting now felt like a cage made of glass and steel. For hours Liam considered every possibility. He thought about telling Gabriel the truth and hoping love might change everything. But deep down he knew that love alone would not break the structure of power surrounding Gabriel's life. Eventually a quiet and terrifying thought formed in Liam's mind. If Gabriel believed Liam was gone forever, he would stop searching. The idea felt impossible at first. Yet the more Liam considered it, the more it seemed like the only path left. Over the next few weeks, Liam began making small preparations no one around him noticed. He withdrew small amounts of money instead of using the credit accounts Gabriel had arranged. He quietly packed important documents and stored them in a bag hidden beneath his work materials. He researched towns far outside New York where no one would recognize his name. Each step felt unreal, as if he were slowly stepping out of his own life. The final part of the plan arrived during a rainy evening drive outside the city. The highway stretched dark and quiet beyond the suburbs, traffic light because of the storm. Liam realized that a severe accident during a storm could easily explain a disappearance. Authorities would assume the worst if the car was found damaged and abandoned near a river or wooded area. The thought made Liam's hands tremble, yet he knew he could not turn back anymore. 2 nights later, he borrowed a car under a false reservation name and drove alone toward the northern edge of the state as rain fell steadily across the windshield. His heart pounded harder with every mile that carried him farther from Manhattan. When he finally reached a quiet stretch of road surrounded by trees, Liam carefully left the vehicle where it would eventually be discovered, ensuring that it appeared as though the storm had caused a terrible accident. Then he stepped away into the darkness, carrying only a small bag and the fragile secret of the life growing inside him. By the time the sun rose over New York the next morning, Liam Carter had already disappeared from Gabriel Knight's world, leaving behind only the belief that he was gone forever. The small town where Liam rebuilt his life was nearly 200 miles from New York, a quiet place surrounded by rolling fields and narrow roads where people greeted each other by name and no one asked too many questions about newcomers. Liam introduced himself simply as Liam Carter, a freelance tailor who had moved from the city looking for a slower life. The lie felt strange at first, but over time it became easier to live with. Months passed quietly as Liam worked simple jobs, altering clothing for local shops and saving every dollar he could. When winter arrived, the air turned sharp and cold, and on a peaceful morning just after the first snowfall, Liam welcomed his son into the world. The tiny boy with dark hair and bright, curious eyes instantly became the center of Liam's life. He named him Noah. From the moment Liam held the newborn in his arms, he knew every difficult decision had been worth it. The early months were not easy. Liam often worked late into the night after Noah finally fell asleep, carefully stitching fabric under the soft glow of a desk lamp while the quiet hum of a baby monitor filled the room. Money was tight and sleep was rare, but there was a deep warmth in the simple rhythm of their life together. Noah grew quickly, learning to crawl across the small living room floor, laughing whenever Liam lifted him into the air, and reaching for Liam's hand whenever they walked through the town park on warm afternoons. In those peaceful moments, Liam almost believed the past had truly disappeared. Yet even during the calmest days, there were quiet reminders of the life he had left behind. Sometimes Liam would notice the way Noah's eyes reflected a familiar sharp intelligence, or the way the child's calm seriousness appeared unexpectedly during quiet moments. Each time Liam felt a complicated mixture of love and sorrow, because he knew exactly where those traits came from. 2 full years passed like that, quietly and carefully built day by day. Then one evening, everything changed. Noah had been playing with wooden blocks on the floor when Liam noticed the boy growing unusually quiet. When Liam touched his forehead, he immediately felt the intense heat. Noah's small face looked pale and tired, and within minutes his breathing became shallow and uneven. Panic surged through Liam as he grabbed a jacket, wrapped Noah in a blanket, and rushed outside into the stormy night. The local clinic had already closed for the evening, and the nearest hospital was 15 miles away along a highway that rarely saw traffic after dark. Rain fell heavily as Liam stood beside the road, holding his feverish son and raising his arm toward every set of headlights that appeared in the distance. Car after car passed without stopping. Each minute felt longer than the last while Liam whispered quiet reassurances to Noah, hoping help would come before the fever grew worse. Finally, a sleek black vehicle slowed and pulled to the shoulder beside him. Relief flooded Liam's chest as he hurried forward, ready to ask the driver for help. But the moment the door opened and the tall figure stepped out into the rain, Liam felt the world freeze around him. After 2 years of hiding from the past, the man standing only a few feet away was the one person Liam had believed he would never see again. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. Rain continued to fall steadily around them, tapping against the polished surface of the black car, while distant thunder rolled somewhere beyond the hills. Liam felt his heart pounding so loudly he was certain Gabriel could hear it. 3 years had passed since the night Liam disappeared, yet standing there now it felt as though time had folded back on itself. Gabriel Knight looked exactly as Liam remembered, tall and composed, his dark coat barely disturbed by the storm, as if even the weather respected his presence. His sharp eyes studied Liam with an intensity that made Liam's chest tighten. Shock flashed across Gabriel's face first, followed quickly by disbelief. But the emotion vanished almost as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a calm expression that Liam knew all too well. It was the same distant control Gabriel used during difficult negotiations, the same expression he wore when deciding the fate of companies and careers. Liam swallowed hard, struggling to find words. All he wanted in that moment was help for Noah, yet the past stood directly in front of him like a wall he could not move around. Gabriel's gaze slowly shifted downward until it landed on the small child wrapped in Liam's arms. Noah stirred weakly against Liam's chest, his forehead still burning with fever. Gabriel's eyes narrowed slightly as he observed the boy's dark hair and pale face. Something unreadable flickered in his expression before the calm returned again. When Gabriel finally spoke, his voice was low and steady, the same voice that once made boardrooms fall silent. He asked a simple question that carried a weight far heavier than the words themselves. "Liam, is that your child?" Liam felt his throat tighten instantly. There were 1,000 explanations he could give, 1,000 ways to soften the truth, yet none of them seemed possible in that moment. Before he could answer, Noah let out a weak cough and shifted in Liam's arms. The small sound broke the tense silence between them. Gabriel stepped closer, his attention returning briefly to the child. For the first time, Liam noticed something unfamiliar in Gabriel's expression. It was not anger. It was calculation. Gabriel's mind was already piecing together possibilities. Liam knew that look well enough to understand what conclusion Gabriel had already reached. From Gabriel's perspective, the situation was simple. 3 years ago, Liam disappeared and was believed to have died in an accident. Now he had suddenly reappeared with a young child nearly 2 years old. To Gabriel, it looked like betrayal. The thought stung Liam more than he expected, yet he forced himself to focus on the only thing that mattered right now. The fever in Noah's body was growing worse with every minute. Liam took a breath and spoke quietly but urgently. He explained that the nearest hospital was 15 miles away and that his son needed medical attention immediately. For a moment, Gabriel said nothing. Rain continued to fall around them as headlights from distant cars briefly illuminated the road. Finally, Gabriel opened the passenger door of the car and stepped aside. His voice carried the same firm authority it always had when giving instructions that were not meant to be questioned. "Get in the car." Liam hesitated for only a second before carefully climbing into the passenger seat, with Noah still wrapped tightly in the blanket. As Gabriel walked around to the driver's side, Liam felt the uneasy realization settle in his chest. The past he had spent 2 years trying to outrun had just reopened the moment that car stopped beside the road, and the journey back to the hospital was about to pull him directly back into Gabriel Knight's world. The drive to the hospital felt far longer than 15 miles. Rain streaked across the windshield while the quiet hum of the engine filled the car, but inside the vehicle the silence between Liam and Gabriel was heavier than the storm outside. Liam sat in the passenger seat holding Noah close against his chest, gently brushing the child's damp curls away from his forehead as he whispered soft reassurances. The small boy stirred occasionally, his breathing uneven but calmer now that he was wrapped safely in Liam's arms. Across the center console, Gabriel kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the steering wheel as the car moved smoothly through the dark highway. Yet Liam could feel the quiet tension surrounding him. Gabriel had always been observant, the kind of man who noticed details others ignored, and Liam knew it was only a matter of time before Gabriel began asking questions that were far more difficult to answer. The hospital lights finally appeared ahead like a small island of brightness in the rain. Gabriel pulled into the emergency entrance and stopped the car before Liam could even reach for the door handle. Without a word, Gabriel stepped out and walked around to open the passenger side. The calm efficiency in his movements felt painfully familiar. Inside the emergency department, a nurse quickly guided Liam and Noah into a treatment room where doctors began checking the child's temperature and breathing. Liam stayed beside the bed the entire time, holding Noah's small hand while medical staff worked around them. Gabriel remained near the doorway watching silently, his expression unreadable. Nearly 20 minutes passed before the doctor returned with reassuring news. Noah had a high fever caused by a seasonal infection, but it was treatable with medication and rest. Relief washed through Liam so suddenly that he had to grip the edge of the bed to steady himself. When the doctor left, the room finally grew quiet again. Noah was resting more peacefully now, his fever already beginning to ease as the medication took effect. Liam looked down at his son with a mixture of exhaustion and gratitude. For a brief moment, he almost forgot that Gabriel was still standing only a few feet away. The sound of a chair moving broke the silence. Gabriel stepped closer to the bed, his gaze lingering on Noah's sleeping face. Under the bright hospital lights, the similarities were suddenly easier to see. The dark hair, the shape of the eyebrows, the calm seriousness that occasionally appeared even in sleep. Gabriel studied the child carefully, his mind quietly connecting details that had seemed insignificant before. He glanced toward the chart clipped at the foot of the bed and read the name written across the top. Noah Carter. The last name caught his attention immediately. Slowly, Gabriel turned his gaze back toward Liam. His voice when he spoke was quiet but direct, the tone of a man who was used to finding answers even when others tried to hide them. He asked how old the child was. Liam hesitated only briefly before answering truthfully that Noah had recently turned 2 years old. Gabriel's eyes narrowed slightly as he absorbed the information. The timeline in his mind shifted rapidly, aligning dates and memories with unsettling precision. 3 years since Liam disappeared. 2 years since this child was born. A realization began to form behind Gabriel's calm expression, one that made his gaze return once more to the sleeping boy on the hospital bed. For the first time since the night began, the certainty that Noah might be more than just a stranger's child quietly entered Gabriel Knight's thoughts. Gabriel did not speak for a long time after the realization began to settle in his mind. He simply stood beside the hospital bed, watching the small boy breathe peacefully under the thin blanket, while the quiet beeping of medical monitors filled the room. Liam could feel the tension growing in the silence. He had known this moment would eventually come, yet facing it now felt far more difficult than he imagined during the past 2 years. Gabriel finally turned toward him, his expression calm, but his eyes carrying a depth of questions that could no longer be ignored. His voice was quiet but firm when he asked the question that had been forming since the moment he saw the child's age written on the chart. He asked Liam if Noah was his son. The words seemed to hang in the air between them, as if even the room itself had paused to listen. Liam lowered his gaze for a moment, gently adjusting the blanket around Noah's shoulders while his thoughts raced through the past he had tried so hard to bury. For 2 years he had lived carefully, protecting Noah from the world he once left behind. Now that world stood only a few feet away, waiting for the truth. Slowly Liam lifted his eyes to meet Gabriel's. There was no anger in Gabriel's face, but there was something even more intense than anger. There was certainty. Gabriel had always been a man who built conclusions from facts, and Liam could see that the pieces were already falling into place inside his mind. Liam knew there was no point in denying it anymore. In a quiet voice, he confirmed what Gabriel had begun to suspect. Noah was his son. The words changed the entire atmosphere of the room. Gabriel did not react immediately. Instead, he looked back at the sleeping child as if trying to see him again with completely new understanding. For several moments, he remained silent, absorbing the truth that the child he had believed belonged to someone else was in fact his own. When he finally spoke again, his voice carried a weight Liam had never heard before. Gabriel asked why Liam had never told him. Liam felt a tight pressure in his chest as memories of the past 3 years surfaced all at once. He explained slowly that he had been afraid, not of Gabriel as a person, but of the world surrounding him. The expectations, the influence, the way every decision in Gabriel's life was shaped by powerful people and long-standing traditions. Liam had believed that once the pregnancy was discovered, his life would no longer belong to him. He had feared that Noah would grow up as part of a legacy rather than simply as a child loved by his parent. The confession filled the room with a quiet honesty neither of them could ignore. Gabriel listened without interrupting, his gaze moving occasionally between Liam and the child resting peacefully on the bed. When Liam finished speaking, the silence returned once again. But this time the silence carried something different. It carried the weight of years lost, of misunderstandings that had shaped both of their lives in ways neither of them expected. Gabriel stepped closer to the bed and looked down at Noah with an expression that had softened almost imperceptibly. For the first time that night, Liam saw something in Gabriel's face that reminded him of the man he once loved. Not the powerful businessman known throughout New York, but the quiet man who once stood beside him watching the city lights and talking about a future that neither of them truly understood at the time. And in that moment, both of them realized that the past they thought was finished had only just begun to unfold again. Morning light slowly filled the hospital room as the storm outside finally began to fade. The quiet rhythm of machines and distant footsteps in the hallway replaced the tension that had filled the night before. Noah slept peacefully beneath the thin hospital blanket, his fever now lowered and his breathing calm again. Liam sat beside the bed with one hand resting gently on his son's small arm, watching every movement with the quiet focus of a parent who had spent 2 years protecting a fragile world built entirely around one child. Across the room, Gabriel stood near the window, the early sunlight reflecting faintly across the glass. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence was no longer filled with confusion or suspicion, but with something more complicated. 3 years of absence, 2 years of hidden truth, and one unexpected reunion had changed everything in a single night. Gabriel finally stepped away from the window and walked slowly toward the bed. His gaze settled on Noah again, studying the child with a calm attention that carried both curiosity and something deeper that Liam had never seen before. Gabriel spoke quietly, not with the commanding tone he used in business meetings, but with the careful restraint of someone choosing each word with thought. He admitted that when he first saw Liam standing in the rain the night before, he believed the worst. He had assumed Liam had left him and built a new life with someone else. The idea had angered him more than he wanted to admit. But the truth he learned inside this hospital room had forced him to confront something far more difficult. Gabriel had spent 3 years believing Liam was gone forever. Now he was standing in front of him again with a son he had never known existed. Liam listened silently as Gabriel continued speaking. Gabriel acknowledged that the world he lived in had always been controlled by expectations, by family legacy, and by the responsibility of maintaining power in a city that never allowed weakness. He realized now that his desire to protect Liam had slowly turned into control without him noticing. For the first time, Gabriel admitted that Liam had been right to fear losing his independence inside that world. The confession was simple, but it carried a sincerity Liam had never heard before. Liam felt the tightness in his chest slowly ease as the words settled between them. For 2 years, he had carried the belief that Gabriel would never understand why he left. Hearing Gabriel recognize his mistakes allowed a quiet sense of closure to begin forming inside him. Gabriel then turned his attention back to Noah. The small boy shifted slightly in his sleep and opened his eyes just long enough to look around the room before drifting back into rest. Gabriel watched the moment carefully, and something about the quiet innocence of the child softened his expression. When he finally spoke again, his voice carried a calm certainty that filled the room with unexpected warmth. He said that the past could not be rewritten, but the future was still unwritten. If Liam was willing, Gabriel wanted to be part of Noah's life, and to learn how to become a father who deserved the chance he had been given. Liam looked down at his son, and then back at the man standing beside the bed. The road ahead would not be simple, but for the first time since leaving New York, he felt that rebuilding something new might actually be possible. As the morning sunlight continued to brighten the hospital room, the small family that had once been separated by fear quietly began to imagine a future where they could move forward together.